Chris Street, 40 Forever. Brought to you by Citywide Heating and Air Conditioning.
A couple of miles outside of Humeston, Iowa, the story of number 40 starts here. The first child of Mike and Patty Street, Christopher Michael Street, was born on February 2nd, 1972.
He was a wonderful son. You couldn't have asked for a better son.
Followed by younger sister Sarah and baby Betsy.
When I was little, I have pictures of him rocking me in the chair and reading books to me.
Well, we used to have hogs when he was younger. You know, you do kind of get that hard work habits back then. Of course, he was so much taller, you know, than the other kids. I mean, he was very coordinated for his age.
He never went through that uncoordinated stage that you would expect for a taller kid.
Christopher showed natural talent in many sports, but even early on, one sport rose above.
He loved basketball. I mean, even after football practice, he would come home and shoot hoop. We always knew he was pretty good for Southern Iowa, and we felt like that if he was going to get the exposure he needed and improve like he needed, that we probably needed stiffer competition.
So after Christopher's freshman year at Mormon Trail High School, the Street family moved to Indianola.
I was scared to move into a bigger school because I had 27 or 28 people in my class and moved up to 210 or something. I mean, after I got into it and worked with everyone, it was a lot better. I mean, I'm glad we did now.
We were sophomores in high school, and he had just moved to Indianola from Mormon Trail. And so, small school, it's not hard to run into him, and we just had friends that were together, and then we started dating right away.
Just a small town farm boy, you're not going to find, you weren't going to find a better dude, around. Just somebody that, really cared about other people. He was never too good to, to go out of his way to talk to an underclassman like myself.
You know the name Casey Blake, and his father Joe called me on the phone one afternoon in August. He said, "Hey Bert, you ought to stop down to football practice." "What are you talking about?" "Well, there's just something you ought to see down there." So I went down to football practice. Here's one helmet above everybody else's, and I mean a complete helmet. Whoa. "Didn't you know, Coach, that this Street kid moved into town?" I said, "No, I had no idea." "Can he play basketball?" And I think that's his favorite sport, and I knew we had something right there.
So when I was a senior in high school, we took a team to Virginia for an AU tournament. So there was a sophomore down at Indianola named Chris Street. Nobody really heard much of him. He just moved in from this small school. So he came and played with us on this trip. And even then, being 2 years younger, he could still hold his own.
And soon after, college coaches came calling.
Chris Street gave you a tingle. You watched him compete and talk to him, and there was just something about him.
We had about 1,000 campers, and I saw this thin, tall, athletic-looking kid walking. I knew exactly who it was.
Being an Iowa kid, we thought we could get on him really early.
Coach Wesley and Coach Hallahan and Coach Orr talking about him and what a tremendous athlete he was. And then the second sentence usually was, "Well, he's going to be a Hawk."
He was definitely going to be a Hawkeye. Yeah, there was never an opportunity to recruit him to Iowa State.
After camp, I remember Coach Davis and myself were talking about it, and we said, "What the heck, let's offer him." And so we did. It was one of the first underclass offers in the country.
I said, "No, there's no hurry on this." I said, you just, we don't want to rush you or anything. You take your time, and it might be, however long before you can decide it's what you want or not. And Chris, as he walked out the door, the parents went out of the door of my office ahead of Chris, and Chris stuck his head back in the door, and he says, "I'll call you tonight."
He's a good all-around player. It's just that he had committed when he was a junior. And that kind of put us out of the picture.
Chris enrolled at the University of Iowa in the fall of 1990.
His freshman year, he had promise. He was kind of a long, gangly kid that played against smaller kids in high school, and so it was a transition for him.
They wanted to bring the freshmen in slowly But Chris could have played, obviously started right away, and I think it was the 4th or 5th game, and he just came in and asserted himself right away.
Early in his career, he was pretty much a defender, a rebounder.
Chris was the point on Dr. Tom's press, and he was so good at it. He had great hands. He deflected a lot of balls. He was always about 2 feet over the end line, which made it very difficult to get the ball in bounds.
The officials were always warning him. They'd say, Chris, don't cross the line. And then they'd hand the ball to the offensive guy, and Chris would step right across the line again. So he took it all the way to the limit.
He's one of those guys you're like, God, I'm tired of playing this guy because he's always on, 110%.
Whether it's loose balls, rebounds, charges drawn, and Chris wanted to win every category.
His sophomore year was a year that he just was like coming into his own.
The 6'8" sophomore from Indianola jumped into a starting role and is averaging 10 points a game, something he knew he could do all along.
I was expecting the kind of season I'm having now. It wasn't a real surprise. I worked real hard, and this is where I wanted to be, and I knew I could be like this last year, but I just didn't have the confidence enough to do it, and I worked real hard this summer, so I think it's paying off.
The kid who grew up dreaming of playing for Iowa began to inspire a legion of future Hawkeyes.
I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, I think, when he got to Iowa, and just remember the energy that he provided.
Relentless, tough, hard-nosed.
He hustled, he dove on the floor, played defense, he rebounded.
Played so hard because he always wanted to be a Hawk, and then he got that chance, and he wasn't going to let it just kind of slip by.
Street, nice play.
The epitome of what Iowa basketball stood for.
There's nobody better a person than Chris, and nobody worked harder on the court. It's those type of players that, you know, fans love, especially here, you know, in the Hawkeye State.
He made everyone feel welcome. He never blew anyone off, kids especially, who were always so excited to see him. You know, when we'd go to McDonald's in our hometown, people would run into him and they'd want his autograph.
And if there was a line to get autographs and it was time for you to shower or time for you to load the bus, Chris didn't want to leave till everybody got his autograph. Chris was adamant about, no, till everybody's leave, I'll stay here as long as I have to.
He really wanted to touch those lives of those kids.
By the time his junior season rolled around, the kid from Humiston developed into one of the Hawkeyes' main threats.
He was a matchup nightmare for most coaches. Everybody was preparing for AC in the inside, preparing for Val, Barnes on the outside. But the one thing about Chris is you couldn't prepare for him because he was so good inside. He could score with either hand. But he also worked on his shot so much that year.
Foul. Here's Street. Big shot. Big shot by Chris Street.
People didn't realize how good a three-point shooter he was. He didn't take a whole lot of them, but the ones that he took were very high quality. Obviously, he was a great free throw shooter.
Street makes both foul shots.
Chris rattled off 10 in a row, 20, even 30 straight free throws without a miss. At 32 in a row, Chris was within reach of the all-time Iowa record.
CBS Sports welcomes you to the cozy confines called Cameron Indoor Stadium. Big Ten meets ACC today as 13th ranked Iowa faces number 3 Duke.
Playing Duke, oh gosh. That was the third time in 3 years that Iowa had played Duke. We played them the 2 years prior in the NCAA tournament.
Knocked us out in the NCAA tournament both years.
For years, I hated them because we went against them all the time, and we never won.
They were the #1 program in the country, and that's what we were trying to get.
In his 7th year at Iowa. Here are his starting players. Chris Street, good rebounder, up front along.
Chris didn't back down from anybody.
Parks defending. Street on the follow, however, and he is hammered by Hill.
In that legendary venue, Chris Street authored some school history.
Mom and I, we couldn't even watch because we were so nervous for him.
That's 33 straight he has made. And a chance to break Ben McGill's record.
After he made his 2 free throws, we just erupted and the whole house was just crazy.
Here Thomas Hill drew up. Here's a pass over to Street.
Chris finished with 14 points, 8 rebounds, and a new school record for the most consecutive free throws made at 34 and counting.
Sit in. And there's a guy who can play in the NBA, too.
That was Chris's type of game, though, because he played with emotion. He wanted to win.
And it was like a heavyweight boxing match. I mean, it was just trading blows to the very end, and we just ran out of time.
The Hawkeyes lost the game 65-56.
Obviously, we didn't like losing, but we felt really good about the team coming out of that game, how well and how hard we played against a real good team, and we felt really encouraged as to where our team was headed.
Hey, baby, is it hot in here or is it just you? You're so hot when I look at you, I get a tan. They must have just taken you out of the oven. Yo. Come on, honey, what's your name? Must be Summer, 'cause you are hot.
Got a dirty furnace? It's costing you money, but we can clean it to improve efficiency. Call Citywide Heating and Air Conditioning. You know, the green truck guys.
That might have been the first day of classes.
We were out at a hotel.
We always stayed out at the Highlander.
The university made us stay at hotels the night before games.
You could eat out at the hotel anytime, and guys would kind of come and go and eat out there if they had night class.
Me and Chris had a night class together.
And we went out and had dinner.
I'd eaten early, and Chris was just going to eat a little bit later. I passed him in the hallway and just kind of said, hey, how you doing?
He was already there eating with his girlfriend.
We were actually at the same table.
I rode over there with him, but because he had a class, he had to leave early.
I left early. I told Chris, make sure you come to night class tonight, because the game's tomorrow. Don't mess around.
The last thing I remember telling him is, hey, I'll swing by your apartment after we're done eating. I'll just wait for you after you get out of class, and we're going to hang out that night.
You know, I just remember that night being at dinner with the team and Highlander and leaving.
At 10 till 7, I was dispatched to a personal injury motor vehicle collision at North Dodge Street, Highway 1, and at the time it was the entrance to the Highlander Inn. There were 3 vehicles involved. That was very obvious, at least 3 vehicles. There was a secondary roads materials truck and combination plow. There was a vehicle on its top resting up against or very near to another car that had also obviously been struck. For whatever reason, Chris pulled out and tried to execute a left-hand turn onto Highway 1, and he passed directly in front of the snowplow. The plow blade basically hit the side of Chris's car from the front axle to the rear axle and did exactly what a plow blade is designed to do. It picked up and tossed Chris Street's vehicle.
We drove by the accident, and I was actually with James Winters and a couple of managers.
You could see where there was an accident, and it looked pretty bad. We just kind of drove by and said, oh man, that was bad. I hope everybody's okay. And as we were driving, I started to think, wait a minute, that color of that car looked like it might be the same color as Chris's car.
James said, that looks like Chris's car. And I said, no, he left like a half hour ago.
And I got stopped on the bridge over 80 that there had been an accident. And I stopped and I said, is it an Iowa basketball player in the accident? And he said, no, it looked like an out-of-state plates. But for some reason, I just knew it was an Iowa person. I just knew it was one of our people. I don't know why. Pretty soon my phone rang, and one of the managers was there for dinner and says that they wanted Tom Davis out there right away. I called Tom at his house, and I just live a few blocks from him, and I says, Tom, I'm going to pick you up right away. I think something terrible has happened.
You know, as I got the phone call and the knock on the door, you could tell right away that it wasn't good.
Took Tom out there, and they walked his son through so that they could to the accident scene, and they took Tom down and told him what had happened.
Knock on the door, and here's the sheriff.
At 12, you don't really know what to think when all of a sudden a police officer rings your doorbell.
He says, do you own a such and such car? And I said, yes. And he said, well, there's been an accident. I said, how bad? And he says, fatal, and I instantly hit the floor.
I remember hearing my dad ask who was driving, and at that point that I knew that there had been something bad. And later my dad came in and told me, Christopher has been killed in a car accident. And so, I mean, he was in shock, I think. He didn't really, it was one of those things where we knew we didn't have a lot of time. We had to get family told, so he kind of did this is what I need you to do, and I'm gonna go tell your mom.
Our life stopped that night. Just our hearts just didn't have a heart anymore. It just was out of our body. It just took it